and this is KAOS 89.3 FM, Olympia Community Radio. The following commentary is not necessarily the opinions of the staff, management, or underwriters of KAOS or the Evergreen State College. It is the opinions of the guest and the host. That being said, it's time to talk a little bit about some of the things coming up in the community.
And I'm your host, Kim Dobson, here back again. Small hiatus, go see my dad. And yeah, we've got some great guests today, as usual. We've got Professor Peter Bohmer here, political science professor at Evergreen State College. And we're going to be talking about the election. The elections, I should say. We should talk about more than just the presidential elections, I think. And later in the program, halfway through, we're going to have Mr. Jeff Cohen from rootsaction.org, and we're going to talk about some of the choices voters are, the hard choices voters are making, given that we're not given any great candidates this year, as some people in the progressive community have noted. At any rate, the following commentary is not necessarily the views of the staff, management, or underwriters of KAOS or the Evergreen State College. They are the views of the guests and the hosts. And that being said, we got a visit from our buddies down at POWER, Parents Organizing for Welfare and Economic Rights. Let's see.
Is an organization of low-income parents and allies advocating for a strong social safety net while working toward a world where children and caregiving are truly valued and the devastation of poverty has been eradicated. Through workshops, education, and information, POWER helps ensure that being poor doesn't mean hopeless isolation for parents and children. POWER has an information hotline, holds regular meetings, special events, and workshops to enable parents to navigate the often confusing social services system. To find out more or to get involved, you can contact POWER locally at 360-352-9716 or toll free at 866-343-9716 and online at mamapower.org.
All right, as promised, my distinguished guest, Mr. Peter Bohmer, is here. Welcome to the program. We got to turn you up here. What's happened here? All right, try that again. Get a little closer to the mic.
Okay, hi, Kim.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, good.
All right, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to do this. And what brought my attention to I saw your post you posted on Facebook about your friend Michael Albert's commentary on the left unity section of ZNet. And you said it was an acknowledgement and a validation of the moral outrage felt by many people, but not only young people, that they are being told to choose between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Now that is a tough choice. I gotta say, being a delegate to the state convention for Bernie, I understand the frustration. I get it, and I'm frustrated too. So, what's a person to do? Do we all just go out and vote for Jill Stein?
So what I was trying to say in my commentary, I'm responding to some friends of mine like Michael Albert, Robin Hanel, Noam Chomsky, many other people. Their view is in states that are very clearly safe states where either Clinton's going to win or Trump's going to win, in those states you should vote for like Jill Stein or not vote.
Right, the swing state strategy.
Right, but in states that are very close, they were arguing, like Michael in the columns I was responding to, he was calling it doing less harm, that you should vote for Clinton, protest against her the next day, but vote for her. And while to me, it's very clear that Trump is even worse than Clinton. I think, the racism is so apparent. He's just a totally authoritarian person, totally corrupt. And on the other hand, she is not as bad, at least domestically, but still is what I would call neoliberal, totally supporting the rights of corporations to make profits all over the world, which has contributed to growing inequality in the United States. So even though, but also is a very big militarist internationally. So what I was arguing to Michael Albert and others on Z was that, yes, there are some differences, but I think it's wrong the way they're dismissing people who are saying they cannot vote for Clinton because of the reasons I just mentioned, her militarism, her anti-poor people history, her pro-death penalty, her pro-locking people up, that they cannot vote for, that is a valid, that's valid, therefore, like to vote, let's say, for Jill Stein, or to say, I'm not going to vote, and merely going to be involved in building a movement that can challenge Trump, that can challenge racism, can challenge misogyny of the whole Trump campaign, the whole homophobia. That's a very valid position, too. That's what I was trying to argue, and that furthermore, by telling people they should vote for Clinton in these swing states, it further divides people who feel they cannot vote for, which many people I know, particularly younger people who've gotten active maybe for the first time, and people who do feel they should vote for the lesser of two evils. That's what I was trying to say.
Right. Yeah, and I get that feeling too. You get a lot of pressure from friends who are saying, oh, you've got to vote for Hillary to eliminate the Trump factor, You're doing a great harm if you don't, and to be honest, I've voted for Ralph Nader for so many times. I don't feel this is a swing state, Like Brett Clubb said, you could vote, for anybody. You could vote for a ham sandwich, he said this morning. We'd still get Clinton.
Exactly.
In this state. So
I think in this state, which most listeners, I would argue very, very strongly that you should vote for Jill Stein for the Green Party, who I think has a really good platform. The Green Party has never been a very strong movement, but I do see a little bit of an opening now, or one of the socialist candidates are just writing Kim Dobson. So,
right.
So, because basically, if Clinton cannot win Washington, she has no chance of winning. And I think she will win Washington. I think the more important thing is voting is only one small part of what we do. I think we need to do a lot of other things. That's what I was trying to refer to. Build a kind of movement that even if Trump gets in, he will not be able to impose these really reactionary policies that he is about, or that Clinton also will not be able to continue the kind of neoliberal, pro-Wall Street kind of policy that unfortunately Obama has been promoting, and I think she is definitely not any better than him, maybe even slightly worse militarily.
Right, and on the domestic front, as far as throwing out a lot of undocumented immigrants too, Obama's deported more immigrants than Bush did, and so to say he's a friend of immigrants is not true. I mean, he's come out as he in the news he plays both sides of the coin. He's I think for her to get on his coattails, that means we're just going to be a continuation of the same old neoliberal policies we've seen for the last 8 years.
Definitely. I mean, Obama's rhetoric on immigration has not been horrible. Like seeing immigrants as human beings. I mean, such a minimal test. But like Kim, like you mentioned, they're picking people up, deporting people. The whole militarization of the border has continued. And to me, I think it's really important that we oppose this kind of trying to kick out immigrants. The whole Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, which is basically like an American gulag, 1,300 people locked up, many just because they're trying to work here. I think that needs to be opposed, probably even more strongly if Trump gets in, because his anti-immigrant rhetoric is really different from Obama's or Clinton's, and it's really dangerous. It's speaking to the worst aspects of U.S. society. I think we need to challenge it, really building a movement of solidarity with immigrants, no matter who gets in, but probably it'll be even more important if Trump gets in.
Right. There are a few movements sprouting in this county too. We have a new progressive caucus that's meeting once a month, and nationally there's it's a movement called the Brand New Congress. So, and that's just the tip of all of the movements. There's much more going on. Like you say, we've got to work on our local, state, and federal legislators and make sure we get good people in there that are going to follow progressive ideals and actually not just give lip service to it, actually vote for the things that are important for a fair and balanced economy and non-militaristic society, not based on capitalism.
Definitely. So, I really agree with what you said, but I would maybe add the following. Well, yeah, I certainly think capitalism is the root of the problems, but to me what's really important is that trying to change society to make it one based on meeting people's needs, one where we will be able to survive and our children and grandchildren, which I think again is really worrisome with either of the major candidates. I think, to me, political means much more than voting, much more than writing letters to legislators. I think it means building movements, being willing to protest, talking to our neighbors, building a force that can really begin to say, what are the fundamental problems of the country, how are we going to change it? Again, climate change, which I've hardly mentioned, I think is so central. I think the hope that the Democrats or the Republicans are going to solve it is, wishful dreaming. And so the things you mentioned, the new Congress, the Progressive Caucus, I went to the last Progressive Caucus meeting too, and I think that a lot of them people are trying to take over the Democratic Party, which I'm not sure is possible because it's mainly Sanders people. But to me, what's really key is like building movements around health care for all, climate change, opening up the prisons, challenging police brutality. There's so many issues. I think, again, building stuff on the ground. I just want to add an event we're doing tomorrow night. Besides teaching political economy at Evergreen, I'm also working with a group called Economics for Everyone. And we've been doing these forums and reading groups about twice a month in downtown Olympia since the fall of 2013. And tomorrow, July 22nd, Friday at 7 o'clock, at Traditions, 5th and Water, they've been really generous. They also let us use that space. So we're having an event tomorrow. It's called It's Bigger Than Bernie. It's Bigger Than Bernie, projects, proposals, and actions tied to the election of 2016. And we're going to have short speakers from the Progressive Caucus, from the Greens, people who worked on the Sanders campaign, talking about what it would mean if Trump, sorry about that.
No problem.
Trump might even be even worse. If Trump or Clinton win, also about maybe turning the port into a people's port. And there's a rumor that the military is going to try to use the port again, so we're going to have discussion of that and then break down to different projects what people can get involved in, like against the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, at the second part of the meeting. So I hope people come. A lot of this will be discussed, and not going to be a lecture, but discussion. We had one already about 2 weeks ago, so that's tomorrow, the 22nd, Friday, 7 p.m. at Traditions. Hope you all can make it too.
That sounds great. Hey, I hope to be there myself.
Right.
I think when you look at what a Bernie supporter is, and a lot of young people are independents, and they don't see themselves as Democrats. Right. And I think the millennials really understand. They're actually much more politically astute than the media would give them. And I think a lot of these folks would be green if they felt as if the green candidates were getting a foot in the door. And to be fair, there was a critique of Dan Savage's article he wrote against Jill Stein, saying that we need to vote for Clinton because we can't have a top-down presidential only Green Party thing. We have to have local candidates running. Well, he failed to look at all of the local Greens that are in elected office right now in Washington State and ones that are running this fall. So he was incorrect about that. He didn't do his homework. Right. And the criticism is out there from one of the... I was reading David Cobb's post, with the former presidential campaign for the Green Party. So he was definitely correcting Dan Savage on those points.
Yeah, so I don't agree with Dan Savage, but I think there's a bit of truth in what Savage is saying, but the question is what you do with it. I think historically the Green Party has been primarily white, primarily people who are, middle-aged and over. While that's a part of the constituency, they've always had good positions, but it really hasn't in most places. Maybe New York is different, Georgia's different, really attracted young people, be really multiracial, with a strong base of people of color who tend to be the most progressive people in the United States. So possibly through the Sanders campaign there's some opening now. For example, just in Olympia, a lot of younger people I know are interested in maybe either forming their own Green Party or working with the existing Greens in Olympia, and that's really exciting because I think in building movements, energy, courage will always come from younger people. I think older people, if they don't think they know it all, if they're not patronizing, maybe have something to share too. And in the thing I wrote, I did feel there's a little bit of the patronizing by some of the older long-term activist leftists of telling young people just you gotta vote for Clinton in these closed states. I just feel something like you're saying is really exciting going on, that people are becoming politicized. They're not accepting the less of two evils. They see the Democratic Party as this totally corporate party, which I do believe it is. Maybe they can be changed at a local level, but I'm more into building something outside of it. It seems that the whole Wall Street nexus, what I call neoliberalism, the financial center of the United States, the pharmaceuticals, the insurance companies have such a hold over both the Democrats and Republicans that I believe we need something new that's both movement-oriented, running people at the local level, but also being involved in going door-to-door organizing, not just thinking about politics, like I said, as running people.
Right, yeah. It's going to take ground action, like, for example, unfortunately the Democratic Party won't share their walking lists with Green Party people. Right. If you want to do door-to-door outreach, you've got to create your own lists, or else find somebody in the party who's willing to work with the Greens who sneaks you the lists.
Right, but there is this big list that people have collected. It's called, I think, Opportunity for Olympia. It basically is proposed that 8,000 people just in Olympia sign that would tax households making over $200,000, 1.5% of their income over $200,000, so really a small amount, and will go to fund the equivalent of at least 1 year of community college education. So just in getting those signatures, that's a really important list. I think that could be used, and so we have those. That's a start for what.
I think within the Bernie campaign, there's a 20 million person database that I think the Sanders campaign might be willing to share after the frustration of seeing the Democratic Party kick him to the curb and the mainstream media not give him any time.
No, yeah, the media coverage was horrible. I read the Olympian, which I read in about 5 minutes, and then the New York Times, which on some issues you can get stuff, but I noticed on stuff like the TPP, on GMO stuff, they were with Britain leaving the European Union, they were fanatic on staying in. But on Clinton, they kind of anointed her, candidate, as soon as she started running, and just marginalized Sanders, saying that. To me, Sanders isn't a socialist, which I believe in. He's more of a social democrat. He wants to reform capitalism. I think we need to go way beyond that. And I was disappointed by him coming out for Clinton so enthusiastically. I think at least he could have waited till after the convention and not been so enthusiastic and supportive of her. But I think he's played a great role by just talking about capitalism, by really stressing economic inequality, by not accepting money from corporations. So I feel this is a really exciting period. I think the people who've supported Sanders, and also people still who felt they got active and maybe were even critical of him, I think that's a really upsurge that's going on now. On the other hand, there's all this polarization, like in the Trump thing, just the last few weeks. On the one hand, you have these horrible police killings, right, of, for example, Philando Castile, St. Paul, was it Alston, Sterling in Baton Rouge, and then, you know, the shooting of the cops in Dallas and
right.
in Baton Rouge. I think you see a further polarization of this country. But to me, the people who are really challenging the racism, including the police, which I think is a central part, not the only part of racism, I think there is movements going. The whole Black Lives Matter is so substantial over the last year. So I feel we're in a period where there's really dangers of fascism, but also the possibility of a really new politics development. So I'm pretty excited about that. I've been involved as an activist for over 40 years, and I feel this is a kind of hopeful but also a very scary period.
Right, an analysis of the reaction to the Dallas police officers' shootings and the Baton Rouge police officer shootings. You hear some of the kind of the right backlash to all of that. They say, "Oh well, we you know, Blue Lives Matter is the latest thing to come out," and yeah, blue lives do matter, but how level is the playing field? How many police officers get shot over how many black and brown people are summarily executed by police without just provocation?
Right, so this year it's about there's a slight increase in police killings this year, including the Baton Rouge and the Dallas. But I think the numbers are still below 30, while the police have killed hundreds of people. I saw one number a while ago, 550. That was a while ago, and
just this year.
Just 2016.
And also to be fair to those numbers, police departments are not necessarily reporting all people of color who have been killed by police. They don't have to.
Definitely. So the numbers, yeah, I think those are modest.
I think
numbers.
they're low.
I think so too. And the thing I would also add that given the police the kind of legitimate violence of the state, their responsibility is much greater. So to me, it's not even an equal thing, because I think the police supposedly, you know, peacekeepers, even though to me that's a kind of 1984-ish concept.
Right.
But I think that their violence is much worse, and the racist aspect of it, even, you know, cities like Dallas, Baton Rouge, I mean, what we don't read is the history of the racism of those cities and of the police. Again, I'm not saying the shootings were right, but I think the context is so left out about what's going on now. And, you know, both the killings of Castile and also of Sterling, and so many others actually been going on. There's one in New York where a cop shot a motorist about 2 weeks ago that hardly got any attention, and many, many others too. So I think we're living in a period where these issues are being discussed, but the movements we need to really challenge all forms of racism, not just of the police, but the continuing inequality, poverty. Just look at some of the economic figures in, for example, Baton Rouge, which is the black area of Baton Rouge, is the poorest part of Louisiana, which is a very low-income state.
Yeah, I think it's also called Cancer Alley because they have all the refineries just in the rural areas where it just so happens many of the people of color live, and so there's racial, you know, this is environmental discrimination.
Totally, but I would add to that, Kim, and this is kind of the whole Trump thing. It's like where you have, you know, the racism, like a place like Louisiana, which has been so intense. Basically, you know, a lot of white people there have identified more as white than working people, and so you see some of the worst environmental regulations, the most corporate power in states like Louisiana, in Alabama, Mississippi. So my point is that racism obviously hurts black people, Latino, Native American the most, but also hurts white people who also suffer from the cancer you're mentioning.
Right.
And I want to mention not just Louisiana. I went yesterday to a hearing for two brothers, African American.
Andre and Bryson.
Right, yeah. Andre Thompson and Bryson Chaplin, who was shot by a police officer, Olympic police officer, May 21st, 2015. And, you know, Bryson's still in a wheelchair. He's taking a few steps. And then again, the police officer wasn't injured in the slightest, but in a kind of reversal of roles, and I would argue very much tied to racism. They're on trial for assault and facing quite a few years in prison, and Ryan O'Donnell, who has other charges against him, other cases, is still walking the beat. So we're not only talking about Baton Rouge and Dallas, I think we also need to deal with some of the issues right here in Olympia, Tacoma, etc.
Exactly. I covered this about 3 weeks ago. I had Lisa Ganser on, who's a Cop Watch activist, talking about the issues, and then I had Crystal and Caro Gonzalez.
All of them great.
And then Michael Vavras on, one of your colleagues here at Evergreen. So we did a 3-part thing on all of the police violence. And one thing that really has disturbed me from the start is the failure of the Olympia Police and the Police Commission to go back in and look at Officer Donald's military and history as several. He did a couple of terms there in Iraq, and he was involved with violence there as a military policeman, and then he got a job with ICE. So this man has got to be carrying some PTSD that's undiagnosed. I would venture to guess that the tests that officers are given to vet them for PTSD are ineffectual because they're not really stress tests. And anything that causes a person to snap and go into that what I call the lizard brain, where it's fight or flight. So you shoot first and you ask questions later, and this is what soldiers are taught.
Definitely. It looks like a war.
Yeah.
And the military has a real incentive to undercount PTSD from what you're saying too. And so I think it really brings home some of the issues that, we see the militarization of the United States, that both Clinton and Trump, going back to early discussions, support, and the militarization comes home, the militarization of the police, people coming back who don't have any kind of really mental health or inadequate mental health help, and they still see a war, particularly people of color, who that's who they're fighting along the border. He was also in Afghanistan, I believe.
Yeah.
And so you do have that situation, which I think really needs to be challenged. For Olympia, I think it'd be great, for example, to have a civilian review board, but one that really had that was independent of the police, that was composed of people who are the most targeted by the police, but that also have power to discipline up to firing police. A lot of civilian review boards are just window dressing because they don't have any power besides advice, but one that would have real disciplinary power would be very, very important, because there are real tension between police, street people. Here and again, going back to the president, Clinton, Trump, they seem to go overboard to just sort of unconditionally praise the police. And I'm, again with Clinton, I said she's not as bad, but I'm just worried that, as the campaign progresses, like, for example, she'll announce a vice presidential candidate in the next few days, and my guess it's going to be somebody certainly not better than her. And, like this one I read, this military general in NATO is being proposed who's against the whole Iran, agreement. That's so minimal, but it's one of the better things that Obama did.
Yeah. Well, we need to wrap this up, and maybe, I really appreciate you coming in, and Peter, and always a joy to have you on the show. Let's talk about the event tomorrow night again before we wrap this up.
Okay, good. So let me give a plug for economics to everyone. And we've worked some with Ruth Brownstein, who's the director of the station. So we've been doing events for about 2.5 years, almost 3. We do on the first Saturday of a month, we have a reading group, and that's been at the Mix 96 office, and we're reading for the first Saturday in August. I think it's the 4th, I'm not sure, 1 o'clock. This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein.
Great book.
Good. So everybody's welcome to come. You can go to on Facebook, Economics for Everyone, and we also do once a month, either at Obsidian, which is downtown in the back room, or Traditions. We have forums where we've been averaging about 50 people. We've done a lot of different ones. So the one tomorrow is really aimed a lot at people who are very saddened by who the candidates are, and it just called It's Bigger Than Bernie. Like, things continue. Like, I've been trying to stress this in the last half hour. So it's tomorrow, 7 to 9 at Traditions, 5th and Water, Friday the 22nd. And we'll have a short speakers about, different movements and things we've talked about, but a lot of it will be just discussion. We had one about 50 people about 3 weeks ago. This is a follow-up on that. And we're going to break down. We're also going to have different groups that are doing actually organizing. Are going to give short talks and be able to talk to them also. So it's really a way of getting people involved to say politics doesn't end because we have these 2 corporate major candidates being nominated in these 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's a good point. We certainly need to talk about it all and digest this all. I think there's a lot of frustration out there that needs to be vetted, and something needs to be done that's a positive force in moving forward. And you're part of that positive force, Peter.
And so you, Kim. I think the idea of, we need to build alternatives. We need to resist the powers that be. We also need education of people hear alternatives to the mainstream media. So Kim, I think what you do in Democracy Now!, so many of the programs of chaos, I think, is so important in developing a different consciousness, different politics. Thank you, too.
Thank you very much. And yeah, we've got another great guest coming in, and thank you so much, Peter. Jeff Cohen from Roots Action. And the preceding and following commentary is not necessarily the opinions of the staff management or underwriters of KAOS. They are the opinions of the guests and the host. And thank you for listening. This is KAOS 89.3 FM. As I said, Jeff Cohen is going to be joining us in about 3 minutes. So, that being in mind,
right here on 89.3 FM, Community Radio, KAOS Olympia.
Another message from a proud sponsor here at KAOS. As I said, Jeff Cohen's going to be joining us here soon. And Jeff is one of the directors of the Roots Action program. And the first, what he says, quote, the first major survey of Bernie Sanders delegates reveals big concerns about Hillary Clinton's pending choice of a vice presidential candidate, with many delegates expressing their willingness to publicly denounce prospective running mates and even protest on the convention floor. And the Daily Caller says, survey, Bernie delegates would hate it if Hillary picks one of these people for vice president. Truthdig reports on the survey. 6 potential Clinton running mates are listed here. Tom Kaine, Junior Virginia Senator; Julian Castro, Housing and Urban Development Secretary; Mark Warner, Senior Virginia Senator; Cory Booker, New Jersey Senator; retired Admiral James Stavris, and also Admiral Mike Mullen, former Joint Chiefs of Staff's chairman. All of them received not acceptable survey scores of 72% or higher. Senator Mark Warner garnered the highest, with 91% of the delegates stating he would be an unacceptable vice presidential pick. So, this is what we're going to be discussing. Vice presidential picks and some of the difficulties people are having swallowing the direction of the Democratic Party as it is. So I'm expecting that call from Jeff Cohen here very soon. So stay tuned. So, not hearing this, so not hearing the phone ringing, so. I might have to give him a call. Hang on. Oh, there we go. Hello, this is, hey Jeff, thank you. Ready to go, I'm going to put you on board. And as promised, Jeff Cohen's on the air with us here. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Yeah, I just had our political economy professor, Peter Bohmer, on for the last half hour. You're probably familiar with Peter. And anyway, we had a rousing discussion about what is the left to do with Bernie not being selected by the Democratic Party, and the frustration that progressives are feeling, and consternation about having the lesser of evils of being the only choices, and the move towards third-party candidates. And I think the article that you shared on Institute for Public Accuracy's press release, you know, there's a lot of discussion about the vice presidential pick of Hillary, and how most of the 6 that were mentioned are unacceptable to progressives.
Right.
So what is your take on all of this, and has anything changed since this press release has been released from Sam Husseini?
Yeah, nothing really has changed, except that if you believe the mainstream media, and this is the one thing that they have good sources on, she seems to be leaning toward, Hillary Clinton and Team Clinton are leaning toward one of two corporate centrists. One is Tom Vilsack, the agriculture secretary, who's been very close to Monsanto. He's a favorite of the biotech industry. He's very close to big agribusiness. He's hated by the Organic Consumers Association for his work at the Agriculture Department, and before, even when he was the governor of Iowa, Tom Vilsack signed into law an English-only bill, making English the official language of the state of Iowa. And the other one is Tom Kean. Tom Kean is a big supporter of corporate trade treaties. He doesn't believe there should be a higher tax rate on millionaires. In fact, he criticized other Democrats for proposing that. Senator Tom Kean of Virginia was the governor of Virginia. He's not even 100% supportive of abortion rights. He supported NAFTA. He supported TPP. When he was the governor of Virginia, he strongly defended the anti-union law in Virginia known as the Right to Work law. So those two, Tom Vilsack, the current Secretary of Agriculture, and Tim Kaine, one of the 2 current senators from Virginia, seem to be at the top of the list. But the important thing for progressives is that people are not going to take it. There's going to be so many delegates in the National Convention that are ready to protest, that are not happy with think about the state that we're at now. 45% nearly of Democratic voters voted for the progressive agenda in the form of Bernie Sanders. And if Hillary Clinton, so in other words, the Democratic Party was basically split. And if Hillary Clinton and the corporate wing, or the corporate centrist wing of the party, doesn't make an overture, doesn't make even a symbolic effort to choose someone from the other half of the party, the progressive wing of the party, it's going to lead to a very contentious convention in Philadelphia next week. If she chooses, she's a corporate centrist, if she chooses a corporate centrist like herself, that would include Senator Tim Kaine, that would include Ag Secretary Vilsack, then it could lead to fights from the beginning of the convention till the end. And it will show that Hillary Clinton is not serious about building a center-left alliance that could defeat Trump severely, could overwhelm Trump. I mean, imagine someone who's not even being talked about much anymore. Imagine if Elizabeth Warren, who's a foe of Wall Street, she voted against Trans-Pacific Partnership Fast Track. If it was Elizabeth Warren as the running mate, that would be a real overture to progressives and would help build energy behind the effort to defeat Trump in November. But you don't even hear Elizabeth Warren being talked about as a potential VP choice.
Yeah, indeed, and you have to wonder how sincere Hillary was when she flip-flopped on her support of the TPP, basically the Alberta tar sands pipeline projects, anyway, so she's flip-flopped on a lot of things.
Well, you're right. I think that if she chooses someone like Senator Tim Kaine, who's a big supporter of these corporate trade deals like TPP, it's going to let people know across the country that Hillary Clinton's decision to come out against the TPP after she was in a tough race with Bernie Sanders was probably just talk. I mean, again, talk. There's a difference between talk and action. That's why a lot of delegates are less concerned about what are the words of the Democratic Party platform, and a lot of the Bernie delegates are interested in an action. The one action that Hillary Clinton must announce before the convention that she can't go back on is, this is who I've selected as my vice presidential running mate. And because that person that she identifies tomorrow or Saturday will be running with her through November and will be serving in January should Hillary Clinton win the presidency. And that's action. It matters. I mean, we've had 43 presidents in the history of this country. 14 of them had been VPs before. They've been vice presidents before, nearly one-third. And so that kind of decision matters. And to me, and I can't, I'm the communications coordinator for the Bernie Delegates Network, which is a network of more than 1,200 out of the 1,900 total Bernie delegates. And my sense from listening to delegates is that the choice of the VP is the most important choice that Hillary Clinton can make in terms of whether progressives will trust her and will get on board fully.
Right, and I understand the criticism from the left about Bernie having to accept Hillary as the chosen anointed queen of the Democratic Party. But when you look at the conditions that Bernie had to deal with, if he didn't endorse her, he wouldn't be allowed any voice on the floor, and some of the delegates would not be allowed into different ways they could participate with the party platform, and there was just a whole list of things.
Well, it's obvious that Bernie thinks that he won, concessions, and there's no doubt. And I've known Bernie since 1991. I trust him. I certainly wouldn't have endorsed Hillary Clinton until the eve of the convention, but Bernie felt that he had won some concessions, and he's accurate when he says this is the most progressive platform in the history of the Democratic Party. But again, those are words. Presidents get elected, and then they ignore their party platform. So that's why a lot of delegates are focused more on who is she going to choose for vice president. That's something you can't go back on. It will be announced Friday or Saturday, and you ignore your decision. You've chosen him or her as your running mate. There's one guy who's still in the running apparently, but he doesn't seem to be in the top two. Most likely is Tom Perez, who's the labor secretary, who has a number of supporters on the left. But again, it doesn't look like he'll be chosen.
Well, Robert Reich would be a good choice.
Oh, there's all sorts of great choices, but I mean, none of them. The ones who have ever been discussed were Elizabeth Warren, and she's basically not even discussed this last week as a potential. Tom Perez, the labor secretary, who's got a real good background in fighting for civil rights and fighting for workers. And Sherrod Brown, the senator of Ohio, who disappointed a lot of Bernie supporters because he used to work arm in arm with Bernie against these corporate friendly trade treaties. And Sherrod Brown of Ohio very early endorsed Hillary Clinton, so that disappointed people. But he's clearly progressive on a lot of the issues that Bernie made the centerpiece of his campaign. So, those would be a few of them, but it seems unlikely, and it's going to lead, when we did a survey of the Bernie Delegates Network, and that's a group, that network was initiated by rootsaction.org that I'm the co-founder of, and we did this in partnership with Progressive Democrats of America. So when we surveyed the Bernie Delegates Network, a large number, an overwhelming majority said that if Hillary Clinton chose a corporate centrist for the vice president, they're ready to protest on the convention floor in Philadelphia.
Clearly, a lot of people are saying that this will lead to a very contentious convention likened to the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago.
Well, it's very likely. I mean, I can't talk about what's going to happen on the outside. I assume I'm going to attend a couple of those protests on the outside. But on the inside, it's completely in the hands of Team Clinton what goes on.
Right.
If she chooses, say, as you bring up, like Elizabeth Warren as her VP, that convention is going to be very spirited. Even people that love Bernie and were disappointed that Elizabeth Warren stayed neutral, I'm sure they will be thrilled. They would be thrilled. I'm sure these battles over the TPP would be a little quieter within the convention because, Senator Warren is a strong opponent of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But the most important thing isn't necessarily what's going to happen in Philadelphia or how unruly it's going to be.
Right.
That's
news media's. If it leads, if it bleeds, and that's their choice.
Of course. I mean, conflict will get covered. We know it will get covered. I've been on the phone with mainstream reporters wondering what the conflict will be or how big it'll be. We know that gets covered, but more important than Philadelphia is what's going to happen in November. And I fear that Hillary Clinton is pulling, and this is in my column that was in Common Dreams and Huffington Post and elsewhere, was that this could be a replay of the year 2000. That in the year 2000, Al Gore was a very moderate and corporate Democrat. He's running for president. There was huge publicly expressed displeasure with Gore, distrust of Gore on the left. The Ralph Nader third-party campaign was having huge rallies. But it was already apparent by the time of the Democratic Convention that there was a lot of people, millions of people on the left who did not trust Gore. What did Gore do? He chose Joe Lieberman as his vice president.
Oh, my God.
He chose one of the few Democrats who is even more corporate and more hawkish than Al Gore. And the Democrats did not retain the White House in 2000, 2001, very close contested election. And what I fear is a replay. I mean, today, progressives are more strongly arrayed against Hillary Clinton than progressives were arrayed against Al Gore 16 years ago. progressives are better networked today thanks to internet and social media that we did not have in 2000. So if Hillary Clinton wants to, I assume Team Clinton has access to Facebook, and anyone who's on Facebook or Twitter or what have you knows there's this huge Bernie or bust movement. There are millions of people, young people, old people, Bernie supporters that have no trust in Hillary Clinton. And if she goes and chooses as her VP, if she pulls a Gore with Lieberman, and she chooses as a VP Tim Kaine or Tom Vilsack or one of these corporate centrists, or Julian Castro, who's the HUD secretary that's been very cozy with banking interests. You know, if she chooses another corporate centrist like herself, and she loses a close election in November, and Trump, God forbid, enters the White House, I think she'll have only herself to blame, because an alliance between the center and the left, I believe, could pulverize Trump, and that you need the left to defeat Trump. You need the left on board to defeat Trump, because the left can, like someone like Elizabeth Warren, who's anti-TPP and who's been fighting for middle-class and working-class people against Wall Street for years, would be credible in taking on Trump and exposing his faux populism. But a ticket of Hillary Clinton and Tom Kaine has no credibility when Trump puts on his faux populism. I think Trump cares about working-class people not at all. All he's ever cared about is himself and his family and his riches. But if Hillary Clinton chooses another corporate centrist to be on the ticket, then it's going to be hard to combat Donald Trump's faux populism among white working class voters. And if they lose a close election after Hillary Clinton makes that choice, we can have Hillary Clinton to blame, because trust me, the Clintonites and the mainstream media are going to blame the left for staying home, or blame the left for voting for Green Party Jill Stein.
Right.
And they will never blame themselves for the decisions they made that said to the left and to millions of progressive voters, get lost, take a hike.
Yeah, and my reaction to that is, you know, Hillary needs to look at how campaigns are run in Europe, because they have these alliances between the social Democrats and the Greens, and they win elections that way.
Yeah.
And so are we so egocentric in this country that we can't look and see what works in parliamentary style governments?
The problem is, I agree with you, the problem is we don't have a parliament. It's like winner take all. So I've been encouraging people that are understandably angry with the corporate Democrats and Hillary Clinton as the head of the ticket. I've been telling people that if you live in a safe state, the only way we can put together like a center-left coalition, since we don't have a parliament, is to work the safe state strategy, which is if you live in a state where the polls show that between the Democrats and the Republicans it's like 10 or more points, and that will be the case in about 38 or 40 states, I encourage people to cast a protest vote for a progressive party like the Green Party and presidential candidate Jill Stein. But if you live in a close state, a state where the polls are showing it's virtually 50-50, I would encourage people to hold their nose and vote for the Democrats against Trump.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. We have a blue state here, and as a friend of mine pointed out, and I said this morning in response to the complaints from the centrists about the Green Party people stealing the vote from Hillary, in Washington State, we were 75% Bernie delegates in the local caucuses.
That's right.
And by the time we got to the state, we were 73% statewide, even with the conservative side of the state, going for Trump.
Yeah.
So, but whatever Seattle and Tacoma and Olympia wants is who is our presidential candidate and who we elect to Congress. So these are all these corporate Democrats that are always getting elected in the state, but we certainly can have a protest vote here without hurting our chances of getting
right.
Hillary as president.
Yeah, you mean without
without getting Trump?
Yeah. I mean, I encourage people to look at the polls closely, and the state of Washington. We'll put it this way: if the state of Washington is closed, and where I live in New York, if the state of New York is closed, we could pack our bags because Trump's going to win. But if Hillary's way out in front in these states, the Democrats are normally way out in front, I'm going to safely cast a protest vote for Jill Stein of the Green Party here in New York State, as I did 4 years ago. But the big problem is, and I'd have to have the courage of my convictions, if I lived in Iowa or Ohio and it's 50-50 between Trump with his neo-fascist tendencies and Hillary, who's a corporate centrist, who's very dangerous, very hawkish, but she has a number of unions behind her, some progressive public interest groups behind her. She can't completely piss off those kinds of groups. I mean, if I had that decision and it was in a state that was close, I would like to think that I would support the Democrats against Trump just to deny Trump the victory in that state. We have this archaic political system where our presidents are elected state by state, and in about 38 states, your vote doesn't really matter. Your state is so lopsided for the GOP or for the Democrats that you could stay home and watch soap opera. But in a dozen states, it will matter. And those are the dozen states where people have got to make sure that Trump does not become the president. Despite all of my criticisms of Hillary Clinton, and I've written dozens of columns critiquing her and her husband, it's important that Trump not become the president.
It is important. And we're just about out of time, Jeff Cohen, and I want to thank you for coming on board here with us at KAOS and sharing your concerns and your analysis of the political situation we're in. One thing I wanted to add, is that in New York State, where you had to be registered as a Democrat to vote in the primary, they've already, the Democratic Party has kind of like shot themselves in the foot, because they would have had millions of independents in November to add to the many who were going to vote for Hillary anyway. So that's really poor.
It was
it's got to change.
Yeah, in New York you had to re-register Democrats 6 months before the election, and there were a lot of people that wanted to vote for Bernie, but they couldn't re-register because the time had passed.
Right.
Hell, right,
yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you so much,
right,
Jeff.
bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. This is KAOS 89.3 FM, Olympia Community Radio. And this has also been Parallel University. We're a weekly public affairs program going on 16 years, and I'm your host, Kim Dobson. The preceding comments are not necessarily the opinions of the staff, management, or underwriters of KAOS. They are the opinions of the guests and the hosts. Thanks for listening to KAOS. This is KAOS 89.3 FM, Olympia Community Radio. And coming right up, we have more music.